In 1840, three lifeless islands off Peru became some of the most valuable territory on Earth. No city stood there, no forests grew there, fresh water was almost non-existent. Yet beneath millions of seabirds lay a fortune. Centuries of droppings had hardened into pale mountains, with deposits deep enough to swallow buildings. European farmers desperately wanted what those islands contained. Merchant ships crossed the Atlantic to obtain it. Governments competed for control. Thousands of laborers were sent into clouds of poisonous dust to dig it out. Peru called the substance guano. For a brief moment, it seemed capable of financing an entire nation. Guano paid debts, expanded armies, and pushed railways across impossible terrain. Politicians spent as though every shovel uncovered permanent prosperity, but those islands held a finite resource. Much of the future had already been promised to creditors. Much of the wealth had already flowed into private hands, and far offshore, migrant laborers were paying the human price. Then Spain seized the islands. Production began to decline. Debt closed in. Peru searched for another miracle and found itself moving toward war. This is how mountains of bird waste created one of the strangest fortunes in history, and how a country mistook sudden wealth for lasting power. The Chincha Islands rise from the Pacific near the Peruvian port of Pisco. Seen from a ship, they appear almost empty. Sun-bleached rock, steep cliffs, and little vegetation. Above them, however, the sky once moved like a living storm. Cormorants, pelicans, and boobies gathered there in immense colonies. Their food came from the Humboldt Current, whose cold, nutrient-rich waters supported vast schools of fish along Peru coast. After feeding at sea, the birds returned to the same nesting grounds, year after year, century after century. Rainfall was so rare that almost nothing washed the waste away. Fresh layers settled over older ones, slowly forming deposits of extraordinary depth. Long before foreign merchants arrived, indigenous farmers understood their value. Inca authorities protected nesting grounds, regulated access, and imposed harsh penalties on anyone who disturbed breeding birds. For the Inca, guano sustained agriculture. For industrial Europe, it would become something far more dangerous, a global commodity. By the early 19th century, Britain's cities were expanding at extraordinary speed. Factories drew workers away from rural villages. Urban populations demanded more bread, more vegetables, and more meat. Yet the fields feeding those cities had already endured generations of intensive cultivation. Harvests weakened as nutrients disappeared from exhausted soil. Farmers tried manure, crop rotation, crushed bones, and imported fertilizers. None offered the same concentrated power as the strange powder arriving from Peru. Early trials produced remarkable results. Thin crops grew heavier, worn-out fields recovered, land once considered tired became productive again. To agricultural scientists, guano was rich in precisely what depleted soil lacked: nitrogen and phosphorus. To landowners, it resembled a miracle. To merchants, it smelled like profit. Newspapers praised Peruvian guano. Agricultural societies recommended it. Demand accelerated across Britain and continental Europe. Almost overnight, remote islands that few Europeans could locate on a map became connected to the survival of their farms. Peru possessed what the industrial world suddenly needed. The race toward Chincha had begun. By the 1840s, the islands no longer felt empty. Ships crowded the waters below their cliffs. Wooden structures spread across the rock. Laborers arrived carrying picks, shovels, sacks, and wheelbarrows. Each strike of a tool cut into material deposited long before the Spanish conquest. Dense walls of guano rose above the work areas. Men loosened compacted layers, filled heavy sacks, and dragged loads toward chutes descending to the sea. Below, open cargo holds waited. From there, the powder traveled across oceans to farms thousands of kilometers away. Nothing about the work resembled the prosperity it created. Dust hung in the air and settled on every surface. Clothing, food, hair, and skin turned pale beneath it. The smell clung to workers long after each shift ended. A single shovel carried almost no value. Millions of shovels created a national fortune. From offshore, Chincha looked like an industrial wonder. At ground level, it looked like men disappearing into dust. Guano transformed Peru finances. Between 1840 and 1879, roughly 12.7 million metric tons left the country. Revenue poured into Lima. Old obligations could finally be paid. Government departments expanded, military spending increased, contractors received ambitious commissions, new railways began climbing from coastal ports toward the Andes, steel bridges crossed ravines, tracks entered territory once considered unreachable. Political leaders imagined Peru joining the world's modern powers. For a while, prosperity seemed visible everywhere. New offices opened, imported goods filled elite homes. Foreign bankers extended more credit, yet beneath that confidence, a dangerous structure was taking shape. Guano income remained concentrated around the state. Commercial intermediaries, contractors, and political insiders. Other industries failed to grow at the same pace. Government budgets became increasingly dependent on shipments from a handful of islands. Even future production became collateral. Loans were issued against guano that had not yet been excavated. Tomorrow exports paid for today projects. Peru had not simply found wealth, it had begun borrowing against the belief that the wealth would never end. Public works were celebrated on the mainland. Conditions on Chincha remained largely invisible. Heat reflected from exposed rock. Fresh water arrived by ship. Shelter was limited. Clouds of fine powder entered eyes and lungs with every breath. Excavation faces could collapse without warning. Isolation made resistance difficult. Escape was harder still. A large share of the workforce came from China. Migrants crossed the Pacific under contracts promising employment and wages, but reality often bore little resemblance to those promises. Debt tied many laborers to their employers. Armed overseers enforced discipline, physical punishment, confinement, and dangerous working conditions created a system that could resemble slavery in everything but name. No cheering crowds watched these men. No monuments recorded each injury. Their labor remained hidden behind the spectacular success of the export trade. On one side of the world, British fields grew greener. On the other, Chinese workers carved through compacted waste under a white Pacific sun. Peru fortune rose from their shovels. Very little of it reached their hands. Once guano became essential to agriculture, geography changed. An isolated rock could now possess strategic value. A colony of seabirds could attract merchants, adventurers, and warships. American farmers also wanted access to cheap fertilizer, but Peru controlled the richest deposits and much of the international supply. Washington responded in 1856 with the Guano Islands Act. Under that law, American citizens could claim unoccupied guano-bearing islands for the United States, provided no other government already held them. Soon, prospectors were crossing distant seas in search of white-covered rocks. Flags appeared on remote islands. Claims reached Washington from the Pacific, Caribbean, and Atlantic. Some deposits proved valuable. Others were exaggerated or nearly worthless. The larger message was unmistakable. A substance once dismissed as waste had become valuable enough to extend national power across oceans. Peru had gained extraordinary influence from guano. That same influence now made the Chincha Islands a target. In April 1864, Spanish forces occupied the Chincha Islands during a dispute with Peru. No invasion of Lima was required. Control of the guano deposits offered something more immediate. Control over the revenue, keeping the government alive. For Peru, the seizure was an economic attack disguised as a territorial dispute. Spain had placed its hand around the throat of the country. Anger spread across the Pacific coast. Chile sided with Peru. Ecuador and Bolivia later joined them. Spanish warships attacked ports, while governments once divided by rivalry formed a temporary front against a former colonial empire. Eventually, Spain withdrew. Peru recovered the islands and celebrated resistance. But beneath the victory lay a quieter defeat. Every year of extraction had lowered the deposits. No military triumph could restore what had already been loaded into foreign ships. The enemy had left. Depletion had not. By the 1870s, the richest guano deposits were fading. Exports slowed just as Peru's financial obligations grew heavier. Railways demanded more money. Creditors expected repayment. Government spending remained tied to projections created during the boom years. For decades, ships had arrived often enough to hide the danger. Now emptying cliffs exposed it. Peru had already spent much of the income expected from future production. Falling exports meant fewer resources to meet promises made during years of optimism. Debt tightened. Confidence collapsed. Government finances weakened. Instead of rebuilding the economy around several industries, national leaders searched for another resource capable of replacing guano. They found nitrate in the southern desert. It appeared to offer a second chance. Instead, it opened the door to a larger catastrophe. Nitrate could fertilize fields and supply industrial production. Its deposits lay across a region shaped by disputed borders, taxation, foreign investors, and competing national interests. Peru, Bolivia, and Chile were drawn into an increasingly dangerous struggle over who would control the wealth beneath the desert. The pattern felt familiar. A natural resource promised prosperity. Governments built expectations around it. Foreign capital followed. Political tension grew around ownership and revenue. Then, in 1879, the War of the Pacific began. Peru entered the conflict weakened by debt and the decline of its former miracle export. Defeat brought invasion, occupation, territorial loss, and devastation. Guano had not directly caused the war, but the boom had left Peru financially exposed, dependent on export revenue, and searching desperately for a replacement. One resource had financed national ambition. The next became entangled with national ruin. Nothing supernatural happened on the Chincha Islands. No curse destroyed Peru. No hidden force made the wealth disappear. Guano was valuable because centuries of nature had concentrated it in one place. Once removed, it could not be replaced on the same scale or at the same speed. That simple fact proved more powerful than every political promise built around it. For several extraordinary decades, bird droppings connected barren Pacific rocks to British farms, Chinese migration, American expansion, Spanish intervention, Peruvian railways, foreign banks, and continental war. Guano modernized parts of Peru. It also encouraged exploitation, debt, dependency, and the illusion that high revenue meant permanent strength. From a distance, the islands appeared to hold endless wealth. Up close, every departing ship made them poorer. By the time Peru understood that prosperity could not be measured only by what left its ports, most of the fortune had already vanished, not into smoke, not into legend, into cargo holds, across the ocean and onto foreign fields. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment below and tell me what you'd like to see next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more videos like this.